We're going to get started. Please take your seats. The WVU Faculty Senate is now back in open session. So the minutes from the last Faculty Senate meeting, October 3rd, were distributed with your agenda. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved as written and will be posted on the Faculty Senate website. The first item on our agenda is to address the honorary degree candidates. So do I have a motion regarding the honorary degree?
Yes, Scott, I make a motion that we accept the slate of candidates as presented and discussed in executive session.
Is there a second? Second, thanks, Eloise. All those in favor of advancing the slate of candidates discussed in executive session, please say aye or raise your hand on Zoom. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the slate of candidates have been approved and will be forwarded to the provost's office to make the appropriate arrangements. President Gee is in another meeting today and will be joining us late, so we'll entertain his report when he arrives. So the next item on the agenda is a report from Provost Marianne Reed. Provost Reed.
Hello again. Good to see you all today. It is hard to believe there are only 5 weeks left in the semester. It's crazy, 2 weeks to Thanksgiving break. And I don't know about all of you, but I'm pretty darn tired. It feels like we've had so many more events lately because we can. And you know, it's been a lot of fun to be together, but it's also kind of tiring. So I hope all of you are able to take some time over the holiday, the Thanksgiving holiday, and get a little rest before we go into that final stretch of the semester. So anyway, a lot going on right now from an institutional perspective. I wanted to talk briefly about academic transformation and give you an update on some of our fall priorities. So student success, first of all, you know, again, we talk about student success, we talk about it broadly, and then we're talking about it specifically in terms of our retention, persistence, and graduation rates. We have been very focused on trying to improve those rates. We were doing really well, then COVID hit. We took a bit of a hit. I will tell you, first of all, that we were continually drilling into the data. It's not as bad as we thought it was. And so in fact, we believe that, well, the data shows that we only lost about 130 students more than we expected through that, through our persistence and retention. Still not great because we have a goal of increasing our first-time freshman retention to 85% by 2025, reversing that trend, but again, not as bad as we thought. I will also share with you that there's some really exciting news that we discovered when we were looking at the data, and that is that our four-year graduation rates, remember, typically, universities are asked to provide their six-year graduation rates, but our four-year graduation rates have significantly increased, which is something that I didn't realize when we looked into the data. Between our 2012 and our 2009 cohorts, our four-year graduation rate has increased by 12 percentage points. And that's just huge. You know, still, we're about at the national average. We want to do better than that. But again, you know, in looking at the data, you know, and we do have a lot to be proud of while we continue to work necessarily on improving our retention and persistence rate. So anyway, that was some good news. There are a number of initiatives and activities going on this fall around student success. One of them that I'm particularly excited about is the Eberly STEM Instructional Collaborative. This is an effort on behalf of the College of Arts and Sciences, or they're leading the effort, I should say, on behalf of all students who take these introductory courses. It's a lot. Eberly offers approximately 450 sections of these introductory math and science courses every semester. And they are serving not just Eberly students, but students across campus. And so what we've learned is that when students don't succeed in these introductory STEM courses, they have a higher percentage, or I should say, they have a greater likelihood of not retaining to the university. So we feel like this is a really important area that we need to hone in on, and Everly's leading the charge. And they're making great progress in this area. I'm hoping that Lori Ogden can share with you all, maybe at a future Senate meeting, some of what they're doing. But just in general, some things that that they are focusing on. One is putting together a structure that will elevate the teaching of these courses, identify and implement best practices in pedagogy, identify and implement interventions to support students. So things like embedded tutors in the classes, expanding our summer bridge program and things like that. And then working with faculty across campus to really understand which STEM courses are needed for which majors. And what type of STEM courses. And we really think this is going to significantly move the dial on, increasing student success. And we're very excited about just the leadership that the college has shown in tackling this head on. Some other, initiatives underway. Mental health continues to be a significant challenge at the university. I'd like to say that after COVID, it's become a non-issue, but that is absolutely not the case. We are continuing to see increases in demand for the services of the Carew Center. But the good news is that there have been some significant investments in time and resources into tackling this issue. So between the Carew Center and WVU Medicine, 12 new clinicians have been hired over the past 3.5 years. And several of them are embedded into units such as the College of Law, Health Sciences, Athletics, and now Graduate Education. Caruth has greatly expanded its virtual counseling services and resources so that students can receive help 24 hours a day. There has been great response to the mental health first aid training that Caruth is providing. They've been offering it to faculty, staff, and students. And so far, 225 people have participated in it to date. And I know some of you in this room may have participated in it. I want to thank you for that. I mean, given all that you do, it's truly impressive that you're able to make time to do something like this. But the idea is that for people who are encountering students, not just when they come in for counseling, but when they're in your class or when they're coming in for advising, to be able to identify the signs that something serious is going on and to make appropriate interventions that are safe and and sanctioned. And so again, these are a couple of the areas that I think where we're making progress, still have a ways to go, but I am heartened by the progress we're making. So our program portfolio review process, we are in the second year of that. I know that it was a difficult and painful process for some of you who went through that. And it did result in some programs, academic programs, being discontinued. But I do want to say that some other programs are reconfiguring themselves in a way that I think is truly exciting. To be more current, more appealing to students, and in some cases more efficient. And as we know, we do continue to face financial challenges. And so, this is just, I think, very exciting. The faculty in these departments are taking charge of their own destiny, and they have been very creative and forward thinking in their approach, I've talked about geology and geography. Foreign languages is now making incredible inroads in revamping their curriculum. And I do think these are going to have very positive results. I'm also excited by how faculty are working together to develop wholly new academic programs that are designed to attract new students to the university. I was just at an event at the Statler College of Engineering and Mining and Natural Resources, and several faculty were very excited to come up to me and share some of the new programs. So, for example, they're working on developing a proposal for environmental engineering, midstream engineering, which would be very cutting edge and so forth. So, I see all this going on within the colleges and the departments. And then finally, I am absolutely thrilled with the positive response to our new mini grants challenge focused on curricular innovation. We received 35 pre-proposals, which is tremendous. We didn't expect anything of that size. And I just thought I would ask Robin Shannon, who is leading this effort, to come up briefly and talk about the update and where we are with that.
Robin Shannon, Director of Curriculum Development in the Provost's office. As Provost Reed mentioned, in September, she issued the Curriculum Innovation Challenge. And we put out an open call to faculty to submit brief pre-proposals for innovative, new, or reinvented existing academic programs. Basically, what's your idea? Why do you think it's innovative? Why do you think it might attract new students to WVU? We knew that there were creative ideas out there, and so we thought that offering mini grants would be a good way to find out what those were. And we were not disappointed. Both the number and the quality of submissions exceeded our expectations, especially since this was our first call. So Provost Reed, Lou Slimak, and I discussed each one of the pre-proposals that were submitted and chose 14 semifinalists to advance to the next step of submitting a full proposal. In selecting these 14, we focused on the grant criteria and priorities of innovative, interdisciplinary, potential to attract new students to WVU, supporting our land grant mission by serving the needs of the state and the region, and designed to attract underserved populations, including non-traditional or working professional students. The 14 pre-proposals selected to move forward represent the very best ideas that were submitted. We're pleased that they also represent a rich mix of academic units, levels, modalities, and student populations they'll attract. One of them is from one of our branch campuses. 2 others have the potential to be offered through a branch campus or in a 2+2 agreement with a community college. Lou and I met with each of the 14 teams last Thursday and Friday and got to share in the energy and excitement they have for their ideas. We are off to a great start developing a set of creative, new academic programs that will attract new students to WVU. Teams have until December 16th to submit full proposals. And in the meantime, we'll be providing teams with some market information and also talking with their dean's offices about the proposals. Up to 10 proposals will be chosen for a $10,000 grant to develop the ideas into a curriculum proposal for a new or substantially revised academic program. Grant recipients will be announced in January. And then Lou and I will work with the winning teams to develop their curriculum proposals with the expectation that most of the new programs will launch fall 2024. We'll also be available to work with any of the runner-up teams that are interested in developing their ideas into a curriculum proposal, even without a grant.
Thank you, Robin. And I find this to be so exciting because it shows that our faculty are not only creative and innovative, but they're facing the future with hope. Because the reality is we do face a number of challenges. We do have to make some hard decisions, but really, we can't cut our way to success. So we do have to additionally find new ideas that we think could make a difference and could differentiate WVU from our competition. And it's very, very exciting. So thank you all. I'm excited to see where this progresses. And then finally, I just want to talk in terms of our academic transformation priorities. I want to talk a little bit about the faculty rewards and recognition process, which there's a lot of work that has been done in this area. So just to remind everybody that we developed a university-wide workload document to create greater consistency, to lead to greater consistency in how workloads are assigned and greater equity, frankly. And then we've received almost every college document. We have posted those on our website. So they are available for everyone to see. And then we know that we will then be working, I believe, in the spring with our departments to come up with their workload documents. And then, of course, we're working with TACO on the pilot of the new faculty evaluation instrument. And last, and really the big issue or the big opportunity this fall is to revise our university promotion, tenure, and faculty evaluation document. I know that you will be receiving or hearing a short presentation about our progress to date, but I just want to say a couple things. First of all, I'm very pleased with how this process has unfolded. I know there's a little anxiety about some of the changes. We haven't changed the document since 2014. And there may be some misunderstanding about how the document will impact tenure. But really, for me, the most important aspect of this is that our faculty have been very engaged in this process. Our team is listening, and we've made changes already to the document in response to some of the concerns that have been raised. To me, this has been a real dialogue. It is certainly an issue that impacts faculty directly, so I would expect engagement, but I think the level of engagement, the quality of engagement has exceeded my expectations. I appreciate all of you, and I appreciate the civility in which you're approaching this, and professionalism. And really, that is all I have. Oh, there is a question. Hi, Emily, I'm sorry.
Hi, Emily Murphy from College of Applied Human Sciences. Just really quick question. Where can we find the university and then the college workload documents?
What the workload documents, it is on, Kimberly, I wish she was here. What? I think did you find it? It's on faculty.wvu.edu. Is that right? Under policies. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Mary Ann, do you have mine script there with you, please? Thank you, Provost Reed. So next we'll hear from Rob Alsop, Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, and he's going to talk a little bit about the university budget model, legislative priorities for this upcoming legislative session. Rob?
Perfect. Thank you and good afternoon. So as part of the overall WVU modernization project to upgrade a lot of our IT infrastructure, we've also been working towards looking at several of the university's processes to make sure that we are efficient as we implement these new systems. One of the first big things that we've worked to tackle is the development of a new budget model for WVU. And a team of us, Mary Ann, I, and a host of others have been working on a new budget model. A couple of things. What I'm going to talk to you about today is directionally how we want to move forward. We've had discussions with our deans, a number of administrators, and stakeholders across the institution. And I think we're working towards this new model, but we still have a lot of work to do. We will have the new budget based on this budget model for July 1 of 23. But in all honesty, it will take a couple of years to work through everything moving forward. And there are a lot of details that are still to be decided and that we will be talking with our campus community about over the next several months as we work towards implementation. I'll also note that this is a new budget model, not a new budget. This will not be a rote application. The university, through its Board of Governors and leadership, will have to work through each year on what the actual budget is for the institution going forward. So our current budget model, where we derive revenues, is incremental, and we have outgrown it as an institution. There are a number of things that we do where how we allocate revenues and expenditures is dependent upon whether a program is online, whether it's an online course, whether it's taught in the summer, whether an expense is a quote central expense or a non-central expense as to who pays fringes. And while we work through a budget in a transparent fashion, we do a number of things that if you were to ask someone, what's the strategic fundamental underpinnings of our budget, it's really complex and cannot be explained simply. And I would argue that from a central perspective, Not that anyone has done anything wrong, but I don't think we've served our deans and our chairs in our college as well in setting up clear ground rules for how you achieve revenue growth and how you move forward of what revenues and expenses are for the institution. And we're working to improve upon that. So we're going to be moving from an incremental formula where you got what you got last year, plus or minus, to sort of a hybrid between a performance and an incentive-based model for the institution. So generally speaking, there are going to be revenue generating units, which are primarily speaking the colleges, and then there will be support units, which are generally folks like the teams that report up to me, the provost's office, and others who do not directly bring tuition dollars into the institution, but are viewed as support units to support and help the colleges to do what they need to do moving forward. So generally speaking, we're going to allocate all the revenues where they are generated, and we're going to allocate expenses to those revenue generating units, work together as an institution for a budget moving forward. So let me walk through a little bit more detail of what that means. So for allocating revenue to the academic units, we're going to take undergraduate tuition, and it's not going to be central, non-central, any of those. We're going to take all of the university revenues from an undergraduate tuition perspective, and 80% of that college, 80% of those are going to be going to the College of Instruction. So let me give you an example. Right now, if there's a nursing student, the nursing school gets 100% or gets the attributable portion of the revenues, even though Eberly perhaps teaches a biology class for the nursing school. Under this new model, which will be all in for both health sciences and the overall university, Eberly College, because they teach that credit hour, will get credit under the model for teaching that class. So from that perspective, the revenues that Eberly helps to generate will be attributed to the Eberly College regardless, well, 80% of it based on the course of instruction, 20% based on the College of Record. I will be, for example, and it'll be on the website, presenting this to the Board of Governors. So I see some snapshots going. This will be available on the website for you. No, it's all great. It's all good. Well, I'm happy to share a PDF as well for you. 100% of the graduate and professional tuition will go to the College of Record as it does. We'll allocate online tuition, scholarships, so that it is a net amount that goes to the colleges will go to them. Student fees, 80-20. And then state appropriations. We have a new funding formula for the state that determines how much money we get from the state. And we're going to generally follow that model for that allocation. About 30% of our appropriation is based on things like 30 credit hour threshold, 60 credit, 90 credit, graduation rates, research productivity. The state appropriation will follow to the college based on those metrics. Additionally, for the rest of the appropriation, which is considered to be our base, we're going to divide it to the colleges based on research activity. And so the more research activity the college does from year to year, the more chance they have to get for the state appropriation perspective moving forward. So you can see each of the colleges will now be able to see a revenue statement of how much revenues are attributable to that particular college. And we'll communicate that each year to the institution and the colleges. So those of us who are now expenses of the institution, what we will do, and I'll give you an example for academic support. So we'll take all of the expenses for the Office of the Provost, libraries, enrollment management, university registrar, academic support, student financial services. And right now for FY24, we're going through an expense budget. We're determining how much that is. So let's say it's $500,000. Based on how many faculty and student FTEs the college has, that $500,000 will then be allocated to those colleges. So not to pick on my colleagues in Eberly, but let's just say that Eberly has 25% of the faculty and student FTEs. They would be responsible and get a bill for 25% of that $500,000. For facilities, it's based on net assignable square footage. So to pick on our colleagues from Chambers, because you have a bigger building, you're going to be responsible for paying a little bit more of the costs because we're going to be spending more support for that building. General administration, research all the way through will have cost pools that will be allocated to the colleges. One thing I will note from a research perspective, for those of you who are researchers, you know that there are sometimes negotiations as it relates to how much the indirect cost rate is, and there will still be general guidelines on how that will go. However, the deans and the colleges will have more of a say in what that will be. What we will do is the Office of Sponsored Programs and everything within Fred King Shop will be a budget that will be allocated to the academic support, to the revenue generating units. The colleges will then be responsible, and if they want to be more aggressive on that indirect cost rate recovery and think that if I charge a lower rate, I can get more grants, and they want to take the risk of that to get more revenue, all of the revenue, indirect and direct costs, indirect and direct revenues of a grant will flow to the colleges. There'll not be a split of a negotiation between research and the colleges. The upside and the downside risk will go to the colleges from that perspective and how they move forward. Again, there'll be some guardrails and parameters, but we're thinking differently about how much revenues and how much the risk the colleges want to take on. So we've seen revenues to the colleges, expenses to the colleges. So let's just go through, I think I mentioned this as an example. Student affairs cost pool of $6 million. College A's headcount is 300. That's 15% of the total headcount. So 900,000 of the 6 million would be allocated to College A. So you can see how revenues and expenses are now going to be allocated in this model. You will not be surprised, or maybe you will. Well, let me take a step back. So each college, they'll get all of their revenues, as I just indicated. They'll also be responsible for paying all of their expenses. So all of the faculty, all of the direct expenses of a college, they'll be responsible for, and then they'll get allocated that portion of the cost pool based on that methodology. So revenues and then two different types of expenses. Once you look at that for each of the colleges, there are some colleges that generate more revenues than they have expenses for the institution. There are other colleges that do not. We are not an institution where we have silos, or that we want to think about that as sort of an eat what you kill and eat what you kill only institution. We are all in this together. So the final piece of this overall budget model will be a strategic investment pool. These will be monies for the president, Provost Reed, and Chancellor Marsh to move strategic investments for the university. And so hopefully, once we get to working through out of COVID and see some enrollment growth, or have the opportunity to make some strategic investments, whether that's from academic transformation or other priorities as the institution goes, there'll be a pool for that. There will also be, as part of that pool, the ability to reallocate revenues. So if there is a college that is in a deficit, once we go through this exercise, we'll be able to allocate revenues so that they're not put into a tailspin. Another way of saying it, let's say there's a college, when you allocate all those revenues and expenses, they're $2 million in the hole. We are not going to say you've got to cut $2 million worth of personnel day one from that institute, or maybe ever for that college. This strategic investment is sort of what I call a 1 WVU fee that will allow the leadership of the institution to make those strategic allocations towards those units. It'll also allow, I think, for clearer discussions of where do we have revenue generating opportunities and where do we have challenges where we really need to think about what the priorities are of the institution going forward. This will provide a whole new set of data and new way of thinking so that collectively the institution can make those decisions. So I'll just give you a quick example. So this is a mythical college. You can see the revenue that's allocated, 10 million in undergraduate tuition, and you walk through to where this college is responsible for generating $28 million of revenues. You see the direct college of expenses of 17 million, all of the allocated costs get you to around 22 million. So the revenues over expenses for that college is around 5.3 million. The strategic participation pool or allocation that we charge in this mythical model is 5.6 million. That means that college is underwater by 288,000, but we reallocate 288,000 from the strategic pool back to that school so that they are at a break-even point moving forward. As the model works, it's not our goal, as I indicated, to say that we're going to use this to allocate revenues for draconian measures. We have to deal with enrollment as it is, but it's the goal to use the strategic participation amount to help smooth things as we move forward as an institution. Just hit on this quickly. I mentioned it before. 65% or 64% of our state appropriations will be based on the state funding model, 25% on research, and then 11% is like the former soda tax and other monies that are dedicated. So state appropriations, as opposed to getting poured into the overall pie for distribution between central and non-central, there will be a methodology for how a college can strategically go about increasing their opportunity to grow what they get from a state appropriations perspective. We hope to articulate clear rules to show how a college can grow and the rules of the game. Happy to take any questions on that before I hit a segue to the legislative session. Yes, ma'am.
Please step to the microphone and please remember to give your name and your
Marion.
color.
Marion, anything I missed?
Sure. Hi, my name is Olga Bryaka, College of Business and Economics. What is the percentage of money from the profits that colleges will be required to transfer to strategic investment pool?
So we don't know yet. That's something that is to be determined. I can tell you that schools that have implemented this model before us, it's anywhere from 15 or 16 up to 22 or 23%. 5 years out, most schools try to get to where it's no more than 17 or 18%. But each school's different. It depends on how close your revenues and expenses when you go to the new model, far from the old model. That's something that as we work through for FY24 later this spring, we'll be working with our colleagues, the deans and the leadership to go through that.
And another quick question, is the break even for colleges an objective for the first year of implementing this new model?
So initially we said we're going to hold colleges hold harmless for at least the first year, but I want to be clear on that. So assuming that we have the same amount of enrollment and we have the same amount of net tuition and net revenues and expenses, it is our goal that we wouldn't reallocate for the sake of the strategic fund for that. With that said, if that's true, that is our goal for the first year. If there is a drop in enrollment, then there will not be enough revenues to meet those expenses, and there'll have to be some allocation. And what this is, I don't want to speak for Mary Ann, but I think what we would do and what we would work through together is to look at which colleges were responsible for what, realizing that we're all in this together. And we look at all of those and say, given where we are, what's fair for how we tweak the model to where we have an even bottom line. So generally, that is the goal, is to use the strategic allocation to do that amongst the colleges, and over time, let the model work a little bit more and more.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Two quick questions. As far as raises are concerned with this new model, will they be coming from the central allocation or will they be coming from the colleges?
It's a really good question. The way the model will work, I think, and we're still working this out from a governance perspective. If the faculty member, I mentioned three types of expenses. So there's the college, there's the overall revenues, there's the college expenses, and then there's sort of the central cost pools. At the beginning of the year, the Board of Governors and the leadership of the university will look at enrollment trends and whether we're going to get additional state appropriations, what the likely tuition increase is going to be, and see whether we have sufficient revenues to provide a pay raise. When we do that, then whenever we do the cost pool for the provost office, we'll take their labor roster of expenses and we'll add in enough for what we think that pool will be. And when we give the information to the colleges for them to develop their part of their expenses, we'll give them the information for their labor roster to increase their costs by that particular amount going forward. So it really won't be central versus non-central. There'll be, ultimately, our Board of Governors will look at, do we have enough money to give raises? How much do we want to put into that? Now go build a budget, assuming, let's say that our labor costs were $500 million last year. We're going to allocate $10 million for pay raises. The labor cost for each of the units will not be $500 million for next year. It'll be 510, and then it'll work through from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for graduate students. There has been a lot of talk about possibility of not allowing for graduate waivers for coursework on, like, so basically on grants, instead the grant itself will have to support the tuition of graduate students. How will that affect our R1 status potentially moving forward? If we can't afford to be hiring graduate students on grants?
I'll give it a shot. So we know that it is critical for what we do as an institution to have graduate waivers, and I don't think there's any commitment for that to change. What I can tell you is and I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we grant a lot of graduate waivers. And in this environment where we've got to be very thoughtful about our revenues and expenses so that we can invest, we are taking a look at whether it makes sense to continue to grant the amount of graduate waivers that we do. And I think we are aligned from a leadership perspective to take a look at that. Because if we're granting waivers in an instance that does not meet that R1 mission, for example, or it does not bring a significant amount of net revenue to the institution, is that something we want to keep doing when, if those tuition were to be paid, we could invest from that perspective? How we allocate those waivers in the new model is something that we're still discussing. I think there's two separate questions. It's how do we account for them for allocating revenues and expenses? And then the other piece is what does an institution of our size need from a graduate waiver perspective? I think those are two separate things that we're trying to thoughtfully look at moving forward as a team.
Thank you.
You bet.
Hey, Rob, Mark Fullen with Extension Service.
Yes.
I'm just curious, thinking about academic units and extension service, and particularly the work I do is in continuing and professional education. The revenue we generate there, we consider that tuition as these are students of the university, but they're not receiving a degree. So does that fall into that same budget model, or is it looked at differently?
So I'm going to be dangerous here, and I simplified things for purposes of time, but let me work through this. So we have deemed extension to be a support unit of the institution. And so what I will say is if there are revenues that extension generates, let's say that extension's budget, and I'm just picking a number, is $5 million. And from what extension does from land grant, federal, whatever it is, they generate $3 million. We'll take that net $2 million and allocate it as part of the support unit going forward. So libraries and extension fall on the academic support side as opposed to a revenue generating side of the institution for budget. It's the same thing for the auxiliary. So student housing generates revenues in excess of their expenses. There are certain things that they also, so some of those excess revenues go to pay facilities. So some of that money will offset facility expense before it's allocated out to the colleges. So extension is a little bit of a hybrid case in terms of revenues and expenses.
Okay, does that put a limitation on growth potential for that college then?
So from my perspective, I think, no, what I think will happen in that instance is, and this is the same thing for the libraries or others, is during the course of a fall semester, the Dean of Extension, the Dean of Libraries will put together an expense budget and what their expected revenues are. And then the college will bring that budget to the Provost's office. And through discussions with the board, and there'll be discussions with the Dean's Council, they'll make a determination as to what we need to expend from an extension perspective. So that may mean that the academic support unit goes up, that the colleges have to bear from that perspective. And so that'll be where there'll be an opportunity for growth, as well as the strategic monies for that'll come into play.
Thank you.
Rob, Frankie Tack, Applied Human Sciences. I'm wondering about one of your early slides, you had the word base before the 80/20 for online. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and how the online will be funded differently from face-to-face, or will generate revenue differently than face-to-face?
All right, let me see. Let me get back to see. So I will need to get back to you on the specifics. I think all online tuition is based on that 80/20 split, and there's not something else, but let me confirm and get back to you. I think that word base doesn't need to be there, to be honest. So, but I'll confirm. Okay.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's some things blowing in the wind that online is going to be more revenue generating than face-to-face.
I think not to speak on their behalf, but I think the provost office through academic transformation, a number of activities they're doing are looking at ways we can generate more revenue for the institution. And we certainly think that online is one of those areas where we need to think about where we can move forward. Is there, I think, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of anything specific. Sure.
Thank you.
Short answer is no, it won't be differential anymore. So whereas in the past, online was considered entrepreneurial, it'll be treated the same as on-campus revenue. In fact, it'll follow the exact same revenue distribution model. So from a college's perspective, there'll be no difference. All flows to the colleges.
Thank you.
I apologize, I didn't understand the question. Yes, it's 100% of the revenues go to the colleges, but not entrepreneurial and some extra kicker. We have a Assad, I think you had a question, and then we'll go.
Yes, thanks. Based on this budget model, I was wondering, I'm from Beckley campus. Is the Beckley campus going to be considered as one college, like one college in the main campus, or is going to because there is two colleges there, or is it going to be considered like a main campus, each college will run by their own revenue?
I believe it'll be treated as one campus with the allocation of revenues and expenses, and then the college itself will be able to take from that and decide what it wants to do within the campus.
So the whole campus will be like run by similar to one college in main campus.
That's
correct. Okay, thanks.
Hi,
Hi.
Lauren Prinzo, WVU Extension Service. You talked a little bit about the FNA, the indirect rates. I just wanted to get some clarification on that. So that'll be, did you say that will be more discretionary, more discretion by the college? And then you mentioned some parameters. I wondered if you could share a little bit more information about that, because all of our work is based in the community and community outreach base. So the FNA rate is very important for that kind of outreach work.
Yeah, so what we know at this point is, as opposed to taking a certain portion of that indirect and sending it to research, 100% of the grant dollars will be sent to the colleges, and then there'll be an expense from research that goes there. Beyond that, we are not at the point where we have all of those guardrails, and it's something we'll be talking about in the coming weeks or months. None of the researchers needs to do anything differently, or from an extension perspective, from a service perspective, needs to do anything differently as it relates to what's charged to a grant or what's not. There'll be guidance coming forward as we work through this over the next several months. I'm sorry, I don't have more, but we're as I indicated, we're sort of directionally in talking about this as we build it. And it's one of the pieces we still have to think through. Generally speaking, the goal is not to get into the hand-to-hand combat between the research office and the colleges, and give a little bit more authority as to discretion as to what's the right rate based on what the colleges are doing moving forward, to give them a little bit more control of their own destiny.
Okay, so when you say, oh, I'm sorry, just one more quick clarification. So when you say parameters, that would be like there'd be set rates and the college would have discretion on which rate that grant should fall within, as opposed to full.
So I think those are discussions still to be
Okay.
determined on what that will look like. I don't want to overstep or overspeak on it.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, Dave Hauser, Eberly, two quick questions. I think you touched on these briefly. You said each college will be responsible for its own sort of expenses, right? And Emily asked the raise question. Is it possible for colleges to give raises to their faculty and other colleges not give raises to their faculty?
So I don't know that we've specifically answered that question, but I don't think that will be the case.
Okay.
I think it will be as I indicated, the board and leadership of the institution will determine for the next year whether we're going to have raise pools, and everybody will have the opportunity to participate in that as we move forward. And then where that may come in is if college A has extra money and college B does not, the subvention pool will be used to make sure that we have the ability for every college and all of our faculty based on market and merit to receive an increase, and not a have or a have not.
Second one, where does honors fit into this?
I believe that they're part of a support unit, but let me doubly confirm and I'll get back to you. I'm told they are a support unit. Their expenses are support units.
Hi, Amy Weisslogel, Geology and Geography at Eberly College. I have a question that maybe you could clarify about if the revenue is linked to a unit's income as a proportion of students, and then the expenses per student exceed the revenue, it would seem that there's a over expenditure on the expenses side that the student and income through tuition can't cover. And the units don't have any control over what that bill is. So there seems to be a limit in terms of options to address the expense per student at the unit level that would have to be somehow addressed at the support.
I think it's one of the most fundamental reasons why the one WVU fee, the strategic fee, is so important. And so not every college is going to have revenues in excess of expenses. As an R1 land grant institution, I will tell you we will make some conscious decisions where that's exactly the case. And other units that are, I don't want to use the word profitable, but more revenues over expenses, where that's the reason why we're having this fee, so that we can take and reallocate. That doesn't mean to say that if there is a program that has low enrollment per faculty or has seen a significant enrollment decline, that through the review process or the transformation process, a decision needs to be made about the future of that program. But to your point, there are instances where we know that we're not going to generate enough revenues to cover the expenses of a particular program. And we intend, as a service to the state and our students, to continue that through it's subsidy, whatever you want to call it.
Well, kind of, I guess what I was really getting at was that if you don't have enough revenue in your unit, the solution would be adding more students, but then that just also increases your bill. And so I think this was sort of the initial question that opened this all up, is that break-even point is going to be really critical. And I think units need to know that in order to allocate their time and effort appropriately.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's why when I said it's going to take 2 or 3 years for us to figure this out as to how we work through the model, it will, because there'll be unintended consequences that we have right now that we're trying to fix, that we will not get this perfect. It'll be the way I explained, I think, to a few folks is, I see lots of folks with glasses, hopefully, or not hopefully, but others with contacts, go to the doctor and they say, which is clearer, lens 1 or lens 2? I think we're looking at our budget model as a sort of an unclear lens 2, and we're hoping to flip it to that lens 1, to where we see a clearer, more thoughtful approach to how we allocate revenues and expenses, but it's not going to fix my 2200 vision that I have at all. Hopefully we make things a little bit clearer.
Yeah, so some mechanism to limit expenses would also be.
Yep.
vital.
Thorsten Rüster, Stadler College. So I have a quick question about the expenses as well. And for strategic initiatives like the Purpose Institute or so, will they be in the strategic pool or will there be expenses? And if there are expenses, who decides what are expenses that are necessary, and have the colleges that then more transparently vote, like pay for them, a say in do we need it or not?
That is our goal. And so when we talk about that we will have so I want to state this accurately so I don't overstate it. I think we're going to add transparency and we're going to add collaboration in our decision-making. Our board will ultimately decide what the budget is, and as executives, we've got to make decisions as we move forward. But to give an example for you for how I would hope this works, and let me take IT for example. I think it's an easy one. So Bryce Knotts is our chief.
Can I ask for an expense that might not be as clear as IT? Because IT is a necessary expense, right? There might be others that are more discussion worthy.
Sure. So let me take one and then I'll get to the other. I'll do both. So through the course of the year, as the academic support units develop their budgets, and let's say IT is 9.5 million and they need to spend another $500,000 to go to 10 million. It's our goal to, through the process, have the academic support units present those budgets and what those increases are to the deans and to other stakeholders of the institution to get feedback on how that moves forward. And so there may be, you could see ultimately with IT, a basic service level of agreement of, for what you get for the basic academic support unit cost, here's what we're going to provide. And if a college wants more than that, they may pay more. And so we hope when we get to a mature budget process, from a transparency and a discussion with our colleges, you have a lot more line of sight as to that type of spend. Now, to carry that forward to something like the Purpose Institute, which I think is a presidential and a leadership priority from that perspective. And I'll also add in, because we haven't decided on it, but we're talking through startup packages. So there's a couple of different ways that we could handle that moving forward. It could be part of the strategic portion of the institution on the startup package side. If that's the case, then perhaps instead of 15% support charge, it's 16%, because then the provost office has a pool for startup packages. We could also drop down that academic support or the one WVU fee down to 14.5, which means the colleges have more money, and then they have the ability to have startup packages based on the revenues from their perspective. And I think that's a decision we're going to have to make as a campus and really defer on that strategic as to how Marianne, Gordon, and Clay want to set that up. On something like the Purpose Institute, I think that's a prime example where we talk about strategic funds, where the president would say, this is a goal for me. We're going to have a number of funds set aside for the institution as to what we're going to do. And so let's say the 15% one WVU fee, 12% of that is for subsidies, 3% of that is for strategic priorities of the institution. And, you know, so the three things, IT, which is sort of base, and then startups, which is sort of in the middle, could be handled differently. And then purpose, I think something like that would clearly be what we would think about from a strategic perspective.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Lots of interest. We will not have a perfect model and it will take us a while to figure it out, but we hope to be able to talk more transparently about revenues and expenses at the institution. I think we have one more question.
So can I just ask, will the foundation be, I mean, how will they fit into this new budget model?
Yeah, so if you'll notice, and I didn't go into that, so it's the page that's up on the chart. So these are what I will, I can't think of the word. It's not discretionary, but there's restricted and unrestricted funding. Most of the foundation money that's brought over is restricted. What I'm talking about is how we're going to allocate unrestricted revenues of the institution. So our tuition, our state appropriations, those things. Generally speaking, the restricted revenues. So for example, the non-indirect grant costs or the foundation scholarship monies or the foundation monies that are drawn over, those are restricted and those go to the colleges 100%. All right, so I'll be quick on the legislative session. We hope to protect our appropriation for the next session. We do not have, at least to my knowledge, a big or long or really much of a legislative agenda from a substantive perspective, other than watching and monitoring what is proposed and watching out for the best interests of the institution. The Higher Education Policy Commission has submitted an appropriation request for next year that is the same that we had this year. They have also requested, and this isn't a new request, but they've furthered a request for $100 million worth of deferred maintenances for all of higher ed. Generally, WVU gets somewhere between 35 and 45% based on the allocation method of that. So if we're lucky enough for all of higher ed to get $100 million, we could have a significant amount to go to deferred maintenance on the campus to move things forward. I think there's some appetite in the legislature. I think the large discussion at the legislature before they get to that will be, what's the state's tax structure going to look like? And if there are revenues left over that, we've got a decent chance of getting a one-time appropriation of deferred maintenance. But I think it's going to take a while. We'll get a little bit of clarity on Tuesday about what's on the table from a tax perspective. But I think taxes are going to take up most of the legislative session going forward. At the moment, you know, they're all worried about the election. I have not heard of any hot button issues relating to higher education, but we're trying to keep a pulse. We usually start to find out in early December if there are issues of concern that start to pop up, and we'll communicate with our faculty senate leadership and you guys as we learn more. Happy to answer any questions on that or exit stage left. I appreciate all the questions and taking the time on the budget. As I said, this is really directionally where we're headed, and there'll be a lot of communication over the next several months as we work together as a campus to improve things. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Rob. Have we stopped sharing? Yeah, I think we are. All right, the next item on the agenda, Melissa Latimer, Associate Provost, Faculty Development and Culture, Chris Staples, Executive Director of Academic Personnel, and Tracy Morris, Associate Provost for Academic Personnel, will provide an update on the PNT revision process.
All right, thanks, Scott. So, oops,
Sorry about that. Yes. Try to get it. Full screen. Okay. should be good.
all right, thanks again, Scott. All right, so Tracy, Melissa, and I are going to try to cover 3 topics here today as we run through this. So first one is just the status of where we're at with the town halls and what it looks like from an upcoming timeline perspective. Second one is tied around themes that we've read through the comments that you have all shared with us with the Qualtrics forum tied around the university procedures. And then the third piece is tied to the changes that have been made to the university procedures, well, whether it be through conversations and or through the comments that we've received. So we were originally scheduled to conduct 18 town halls across the college's schools, whether it be the Morgantown, Kaiser, and Beckley campuses. To date, we've completed 25 town halls, and we have 1 additional town hall taking place Wednesday, November 16th with the Faculty Welfare Committee. So the comment period opened up on Friday, October 7th, and it's going to remain open until this Friday, November 11th. And this will allow the Provost Office the opportunity to respond to the comments, make any additional changes to the proposed university procedures prior to the Thanksgiving break, if appropriate. And the final draft university procedures have to be to Faculty Senate Chair Scott Wayne on Monday, November 28th, because that's 5 days before the December 5th, 2022 meeting. So since opening up the university procedures comment period, we've received 50 comments to date. 40 of the 50 comments, we appreciate that were submitted with a name and email. It made it much easier for us to follow up with the faculty member, specifically with the comments that we did not quite understand. So in those cases, we did reach out to the faculty member to have a conversation to better understand what they were looking for or asking. The top 3 areas that received the most comments were bucketed, at least from our perspective, within the ratings, non-continuation, criteria, whether that be absolute criteria or the higher standards for promotion from associate to professor, and then external reviews. So 20 comments, or roughly 40%, were specific to the ratings and the non-continuation language. The themes within this category were concerns about the process and or the concerns regarding tenure. So 75% of those 20 comments felt that the non-continuation language was directed towards removing tenure. That's not our goal. We're not looking to remove tenure. Rather, our goal was to be transparent with the process and ensure that the process is rigorous to protect tenure. Close to 50% of those 20 comments were concerned or confused with the steps of the non-continual process. So whether that be 2 consecutive unsatisfactory ratings or 2 unsatisfactory ratings in multiple mission areas in 1 year. Tracy is going to speak to the added language to clarify that process as well as changes to this specific section. The second category then, 9 comments or 18% targeted the criteria. This included absolute criteria or the proposed higher standards for promotion from associate to professor. Just like to reiterate within this category that if we think about the department, the schools, the colleges, that is within your purview to set whatever that unit criteria is. That is not something that's going to be dictated by the Provost Office. So just wanted to share that piece with you. And then the third one, before I turn it over to Melissa, was tied around 9 comments, or again, 18% were specific to the external reviews. A majority of the comments focused on the added workload of the external reviews. So Melissa is going to speak to the changes that were made to the external review process to provide additional flexibility.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm going to talk about changes to the process that we've made so far. And I'm also going to talk about some of the changes to the text that we did early on. And then Tracy will finish up with things that we've changed more recently based on your feedback. As Chris indicated, we have increased the number of town hall meetings from 18 to 26. And all of these were scheduled for the best times and location for the faculty of that academic unit. And so that was to try to increase the amount of people that could participate. We did release the draft of the document to the campus community earlier than originally planned. And we've now shared 2 additional proposed drafts with the campus, the last one happening this past Thursday, along with our responses to those comments. We've also extended the comment period beyond the original one that we proposed. We made all our documents available and easy to provide feedback on a new website dedicated to this process. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about some changes to the text that we've done so far. We removed any reference to a mandatory post-tenure, post-promotion review that would have occurred every 5 years for all faculty members. For those of you who are on the Recognition Rewards Committee, remember that that was there in the original draft. And after we received significant feedback from all types of constituents about the amount of time and energy that would be placed in that. And aren't we already doing formative and summative evaluations every single year? And so the answer is yes, we are. So we want to make sure that we're going to keep doing that. So we've made that required. And so we removed that mandatory post-tenure review. We also modified the new external review process so that it is more flexible and equitable for our librarian, clinical, teaching track faculty, as well as our colleagues on the regional campuses. And so what we've done is make it increase the flexibility in terms of where those external reviewers could come from. And we've made clear that if it's research you're being externally reviewed on, it is definitely the R1 institutions that we've been using. But if it's for teaching, clinical work, maybe it makes sense, and librarians, maybe it makes sense to find those reviewers elsewhere, maybe teaching intensive institutions. And talking to our librarian colleagues, they've indicated that librarians can be other places besides institutions of higher education, and they would like to be able to potentially find reviewers from those locations. And so we've essentially expanded where they can come from. And then in addition, what we've done for assistant to associate professor, we've indicated that 2 of the 4 could come from our campus, but they have to be outside of the individual's unit. So that gives additional flexibility so that they could identify 4 reviewers for our colleagues. The Recognition and Rewards Committee, there was a subcommittee that was really interested in changing the flow of the document. And this was toward the end of our work with them. And we were really trying to push to get all the way to the end of the 29-page document. And this subcommittee said it was really important to make it less legal. And so we said, okay, do that as a subcommittee, and then we'll take a look at them. So we accepted 99% of those suggested edits. I think it was the they, them pronouns that we did not change, and some of the must and the shalls, but essentially we accepted, and that really changes the flow of the document from the very first to the very end. We have, in addition, also added lots of clarifying language to the document in response to the feedback that we've been receiving from the town hall meetings.
In response to a lot of questions in the town halls and to some of the comments submitted online, we wanted to make sure that we highlighted within the document where ratings come from and what it takes to get a rating of unsatisfactory. So after the initial distribution of the document, our first round of revisions, we added the following language, if you've not read it yet. As noted in section 2B, each academic unit must specify the criteria by which ratings of excellent, good, satisfactory, and unsatisfactory are assigned. Ratings of unsatisfactory are reserved for cases in which the faculty member is not meeting the academic unit's minimal standards for job performance. Ratings of unsatisfactory follow a period of performance decline for which the faculty member had received specific feedback in prior annual evaluations, yet has not demonstrated improvement, or B, gross misconduct, for example, job abandonment. We think this is really important. People have know what the criteria are within their unit, and that units are able to establish criteria that covers a lot of concerns that faculty have. So if you take fears around a sudden bad year, well, we would recommend best practice for, say, research productivity. It would discuss something an academic unit might talk about a 3-year rolling average. An academic unit might talk about what type of progress would be made on long form scholarship, so that we're not talking about anybody suddenly having a bad year and then automatically being placed in an unsatisfactory. A unit might say something like this: we want to make sure that everybody has had feedback. They get feedback, they get the opportunity to improve, which again is the purpose for that language, not wondering if you'll get feedback. We're saying feedback must be given. And let's take an example of declining productivity or having a few years of not performing well. Let's take a unit that says unsatisfactory would mean 0 publications in a 3-year period, no progress towards a long-form scholarship, no article submissions, no grant applications. That's what we're really talking about when we get to unsatisfactory. We're not talking about somebody doing really well, rocking it with 6, 7 publications in 1 year, and then just not having any in the next. That's not what we want to happen. So that's the purpose for that language. Okay. In addition, we have we've removed the language that was originally in the document around receiving unsatisfactories in 2 mission areas. So we have deleted the following sentence. In addition, if a faculty member receives unsatisfactory across 2 of the 3 mission areas in an annual review at any level, that level of review must recommend non-continuation. Again, consistent with the previous addition, we want to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to get feedback and improve before they're considered unsatisfactory, and definitely prior to any recommendations for non-continuation. Now, there was within that same section of the document on page 3, there were initially 2 sentences where it said if there were if there was ongoing unsatisfactories or 2 out of 3 areas must recommend non-continuation, the language has changed in those 2 may recommend non-continuation. And then with the recent version placed online last week, on page 8, we have removed the following clause around the University Code of Conduct. So we have deleted faculty members must engage in behaviors consistent with the University Code of Conduct and university values. We believe there's sufficient language in those passages around contributing to the life of your unit that we don't need the more subjective code language. We'll take questions.
Are there any questions?
Hi, Scott Crutchlow, Eberly. I guess, Tracy, this will be for you because they're all about the non-continuation policies. In the section about levels, is it accurate that the dean or the provost could give you an unsatisfactory even if your department and chair don't? Just in terms of that 1 level speaking.
Okay, would it be possible?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the reasons why I love criteria and having a priori criteria is to remove subjective behavior. So if a unit were providing ratings to a faculty member that was not consistent with their own criteria, is it possible? Same thing as if on the positive end, if somebody's performing well, their unit has given them a rating not consistent, you could imagine that's why we have multiple levels of review to correct those type of inconsistencies, but it would have to be consistent with the criteria that the academic unit has established.
But it still would be possible. Well, I mean, I just bring this up because, as you know, I'm political science, and really, if that's the way that y'all are going to interpret this, great. But we all know administrative teams turn over every X number of years. And as a political scientist, I will look at this from a, the words are the same, but you change Thurgood Marshall to Clarence Thomas, or you change Ginsburg to Barrett. That if the words are there and you're winding up with new university presidents like Ben Sass in Florida and whatnot. So technically it is still possible.
Scott, thank you for that. I do appreciate the concerns that come up. I would note that currently each of those levels of review, individuals must make a recommendation, either in favor of continuation or against continuation. So already existing, there's always the case for at each level for a recommendation to be made or not. And I feel like these current guidelines have more safeguards than if we're looking at our current document. But as you say, everything's not perfect. Is it possible that different levels come to different conclusions? Of course, it's possible. But again, I feel like the more, the better our units do with their criteria for ratings and ensure that all the faculty are aware of them and have had feedback and have had the opportunity to improve, it drastically diminishes the likelihood of any of the catastrophic scenarios that you've alluded to.
I've got two more that might be a little bit weird, but they come up in terms of conversations. As you can imagine, just talking about this gets people worried.
Absolutely.
So another thing that's been brought up has to do with the situation at Georgia, which folks may know is currently under censure from AEP for the changes that they've made there recently. And this is just a informational question because I have no idea myself. The specific part of the new document at Georgia, why they've been censured, is that there is not a faculty, an elected faculty committee that takes part in the adjudication process to dismiss a faculty member who has tenure. Just so folks know, does that currently exist in the WVU system? And if so, where would that exist in the WVU system?
Okay, I have the same read with a lot of caveats around the Georgia case. With respect to the recommendation of an elected tribunal, whether it's this, I wouldn't say the same, but we have parallels with a university panel. We have faculty that are involved in all of these cases where there's personnel action being considered. Now, with respect to the Georgia case and the recommendations from the AAUP, I would be uncomfortable if all we had was a group, a tribunal, and we weren't having language around criterion and having requirements of feedback and requirements that people have the opportunity to improve. Now, if the question is, do we add one more thing above that or additional to the process? I think that's always worth talking about, but in lieu of, I think it would be dangerous. To me, it raises more possible subjective elements.
Okay, the absolute last one, I promise. As y'all noted, y'all have decided not to do the post-tenure review, which is not held by every public land grant / flagship.
Scott, I didn't hear.
Oh yeah. So
not
as y'all have said, y'all have decided not to do the post-tenure review, which most of the public flagships do. There's a couple of exceptions like Ole Miss, but most of them do them. But as part of those processes, usually that's where these kinds of issues would be dealt with on a 5-year or 6-year basis, depending upon the university. Is there a reason why we have the 2 or 3 year time frame that we have in our document versus something more like a 5 or 6 year time frame?
Okay, yes, I think there's multiple. Would you like to, or I can keep going? Okay, so it was my hope that the additional language around what it took to get an unsatisfactory and having the feedback and declining performance demonstrated that this is a long process and there is nobody. The way it's currently written, people would not be discontinued in 2 years. Now, there were discussions, a lot of information was gathered from our peers around how long it normally takes for their process to run.
We're right in the center.
Yeah, some quicker, some longer. I'm not, is that answering your question?
Yeah, no, just different people have asked different questions and wanted to make sure that y'all all had a chance to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have time for one more?
Yes.
Mark Fullen, Extension Service. I'm curious, on from a broad perspective, I really appreciated the openness of the process and the comments and the changes. I wonder if the provost office would consider recommending that to the colleges as they develop their policies to support this one, because that hasn't always been the case, and faculty don't always have a step in that process, but as we have here.
Well said. Yeah, and I hope that all faculty are communicating with people within their college about how you would like this next step of the process to play out. We do want to have a lot of faculty involvement and shared governance in that process.
Yeah.
So the next step is the college level
Correct.
and then the departmental level. And you probably can tell from what I say, I continue to believe that that department level document is so crucial.
Thanks.
Somebody's run off with my document again. Do you have it?
Hey, Tracy, do you have this document? You walking away with your stuff? Sorry.
No problem. All right, so next is my report. I'll try and keep it very brief. I just want to thank everyone who donated blood during the Faculty Senate blood drive. And I also wanted to provide a little bit of information about the vote process that will happen at the December meeting. So we will distribute with the agenda a resolution that will call for a vote to approve the faculty evaluation, promotion, and tenure document. We will debate that resolution. The resolution is subject to amendments. The document, the P&T document itself is not open to changes or amendments. And so that resolution will essentially say, whereas the Faculty Senate is recognized body representing the faculty, whereas the Faculty Senate shall have authority to recommend policies to the president and the governing policy boards with regards to responsibilities, rights, duties of faculty members, such as standards of appointment and conduct, criteria for tenure and promotion, retirement, academic freedom, salary, and the nature and conditions of their work, according to Section 5E of the WVU Faculty Constitution, whereas the provost has presented proposed changes to the West Virginia University procedures for faculty appointment, annual evaluation, promotion, and tenure. The draft will be attached to the agenda. Be it resolved that the Faculty Senate approves the proposed West Virginia University procedures for faculty appointment, annual evaluation, promotion, and tenure. So that is the resolution we will vote on at the December meeting. And again, amendments can be offered to that resolution, but direct amendments to the document, since the Faculty Senate does not own that document, cannot be made. Just a reminder, each person wishing to speak to the amendment to the resolution or any amendments can speak no more than twice. And then once the debate has completed, we will distribute a Qualtrics ballot to the faculty senators. That ballot would be open for probably an hour after meeting concludes. And since the provost office has asked for feedback, should the approval fail, we're going to offer an option to provide comments that we will pull out of the ballots and provide to the provost office. We won't distribute names of anyone offering those comments. So I do encourage senators to reach out to the faculty in your units to get their feedback and input. I will say that senators do not have to vote the majority opinion of their units. You do have discretion to vote your conscience, but it is good practice, since you're representing your constituents, to get their input. Also encourage the faculty to reach out to your senators and provide input regarding that vote. So that is my report. Are there questions for me? All right, so moving on. Next, we'll hear from Curriculum Committee report from Lori Ogden. Lori.
Thanks. I have 5 for approval items. The first is the new courses report in Annex 1, the course changes report in Annex 2, and then 3 program changes. The first is a program change in early childhood special education. And then the last 2 were actually deactivation proposals. One for electronic engineering technology and the other for industrial technology. And then last, there is a for information item regarding the proposed timeline change for program changes.
Are there any questions for Lori? All right, so we will bundle the new courses report, course change report, and program changes into a single votable item. Are there any discussion about any of those annexes? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the new course report, course change report, and program changes, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand on Zoom. Any opposed? So those are changed. Thank you, Lori. So next we'll hear from the Chair of the General Education Foundation Committee, Lisa DiBartolomeo. Lisa.
Hope everybody's ready to vote tomorrow, if you haven't already. We have 2 courses for approval: Media 279, Intro to Documentary Film for Jeff 4, and Social Work 151, Introduction to Social Work for Jeff 5. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions regarding Annex 4? All right, all those in favor of approving Annex 4, please say aye or raise your hand. Are there any opposed? So those Jeff courses are approved. Diana Davis is not able to be here today, but the TACO committee did not have a report. So next we'll hear from the Committee on Committees Chair Leslie Cottrell. Leslie, is she here today?
Hello, I'm remotely. I'm in Boston. Sorry, Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So the Committee on Committees presents the annex for approval that includes a slight change in ex officio role for the service committee that you can see there, as well as on the curriculum committee, there were 3 members who were unable to complete their service to that committee. We have found 3 thanks to Corey's survey mid-semester and one that you initiated, Scott, much appreciated. We needed additional volunteers, and we have 3 new members for the curriculum committee.
Are there any questions for Leslie? All right, all those in favor of approving the committee appointments in Annex 5, please say aye. Any opposed? Those committee appointments are approved. Next, we'll hear from the representative from state government, Eloise Elliott. Eloise.
Thanks, Scott. I attended the Advisory Council of Faculty Retreat this past weekend at Pipestem State Resort. And there were 19 of 20 of us members there that represented all the state colleges and universities. We serve, if you don't know what we do, we serve as an advisory capacity to the Higher Education Policy Commission and to the West Virginia Legislature. So during this retreat, we heard a report from HEPC and then their perspective of the legislative issues that could be coming up. And with that, we are now developing our the issues that we'll be addressing as the ACF. And I'll share those with you in the next meeting.
Are there any questions for Eloise? Next, we'll hear from the Board of Governors rep, Stan Heilman. Stan.
So we haven't met since the last meetings, no report, but we do have a meeting this Friday.
Any questions for Stan? Thank you, Stan. Is there any new business?
Stefania Sanisha, Davis College. Per the request of a couple of constituents of the college, I move that Faculty Senate resolves to delay any proposed vote on the revised procedure for faculty appointment, annual review, promotion and tenure until mid-spring semester.
Do we have a second for that motion? Okay, second for that motion. All right, is there any discussion or questions related to that motion? Emily?
Could we possibly have Melissa or Tracy or Chris like explain what ramifications that would cause for the process? We move it to spring?
You want to come up here? Or you're going to stand over there?
I was just gonna stand here.
Okay, that'll work.
So you mean postponing the actual vote until like January or February?
Yes.
Okay, so what that would mean then is assuming that it was voted on in January, and let's just assume it was a positive vote of support, it would go live, but it would reduce the amount of time that a college had to make sure that their document was in line, and the colleges need to get their in line before the departments get theirs in line. So it would just slow down that process.
Well, I just add, yes, it'd slow down the process. That's just a longer period of time if the document was accepted, that issues around equity and clarifying feedback would be able to be implemented. So some of what some of us might consider positive changes that would delay those.
All right. There's one comment here in the chat. Just give me a minute. Where is that, Frankie? Okay, you want to just read it? Okay, so the question is, why the delay and what would be the purpose for that delay?
Few faculty considered too short the amount of time that we had for discussing the document. So it's just a matter of time that we have had as faculty.
So referring to the fact that the document was distributed mid-semester. Okay,
So that's not counting the town halls that started in August, right?
right, correct.
Okay, just checking.
Any other questions or discussion?
Just to make sure I was following earlier. So the final draft of document that we would be voting on the first Monday in December, we would get the Monday before that.
5 days before.
It will be the Monday before, correct.
I mean, I would just add, that's extremely little time to get feedback from our constituents is all I would suggest.
You want to comment on that, Chris?
So Scott, what we'll do is, as we're working through the comments and we make changes, we'll upload that to the website as soon as that takes place. It's just the 5 days is tied to Scott's timeline with Faculty Senate. That's why I mentioned that in my discussion points.
So I think that you're making changes to document as they go out, right? So most recent release was this past Thursday, I believe.
Last Thursday.
And you will continue to make.
Yep.
Okay. Yes.
Joe Hodge in Eberly College. So I'm not an expert in parliamentary procedures, but should it not be for important matters that you have the opportunity to discuss something like this at one meeting, you hold it over to the next meeting for a vote? Is that not correct parliamentary procedures?
The next meeting would be the December meeting when we intend to take up the PNT document.
Yes, but we would not have the final draft of the final document until 5 days before. So then the December meeting would be an opportunity to discuss it. And then you would hold it over for a formal vote to the next meeting.
So that's different than the motion that has been proposed. So according to the parliamentary, that would be preference. It's not necessarily parliamentary procedure. We can make a motion to that effect as well after we finish with addressing the motion that's on the table. Any other discussion about the motion to delay to the spring semester? Anything else online, Frankie? All right, so we'll take a vote. So the motion is to delay a vote on PNT guidelines document until the spring semester. One more question. Okay. Kim Kelly has a comment or question online. Kim? You need to
I'm sorry. No, I was voting. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So we'll take a vote to delay the vote from December 5th meeting to sometime in the spring. Is there a sometime January mid-semester? Is it open?
Semester was the time mentioned.
Mid-semester.
Yeah, requested. Yes, mid-semester.
Say that again, Dave. So the resolution is, the motion is to delay the vote from December 5th to middle of the spring semester. All right, all those in favor of adopting that motion, please say aye. All those opposed? I think the nays have it. Oh, we want to do a show of hands. Okay. All right. So we'll do a show of hands and count the vote. All those in favor. That was close. Okay. All right. So we'll do a hand vote. All those in favor of adopting this resolution to delay the vote on the PNT document from the December 5th meeting to middle of the spring semester, please raise your hand and keep them up while we get a count. And keep them up online as well. How many do we have total, Corey? 17 votes total. All those in favor, all those opposed to the resolution to delay the vote, please raise your hands. Hold on, I get the count. So we had 17 in favor and 45 opposed. The motion does not pass. Is there any other new business? Do we have a motion to adjourn? Do we have a second? Wait, President Gee. Do you have a report, President Gee? All right, thank you, President Gee. So we are adjourned.